But you didn't come here for me. You came to hear from Congressman Paul. So without further ado, the next President of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
I've been talking about the principles of liberty for a long time, but I've always thought that the state of Alaska has already gotten the message, and it sounds like it has. The revolution that we're going through is a philosophical revolution, but it couldn't happen without a state like this, because people from Alaska I have known have always been independent-minded, and just as soon the feds stay out of their lives and stay out of their So it certainly is great. You know, our country has a lot of problems, and I get a bit frustrated with what the Republican Party offers a lot of times to the Democrats. Have you ever noticed that we change parties one to the other and policies never change? Well, that is annoying at times, because they speak a little different language. You know, Republicans are conservatives, they want to balance the budget and cut the spending, but they don't do it when they get the chance. And I want to change that. So my suggestion is the first year we'll cut the budget by $1 trillion a year. Figure out where to cut it, and we have it worked out. We have a plan to do this, but it cuts some areas where a lot of times Republicans don't want to cut, and that is this overseas spending, the welfare that goes to foreigners and foreign banks and foreign aid and foreign wars. We could cut a lot of money out of overseas spending and move rapidly toward the balanced budget. Still today, if you do polling in the country, most people still list the economy as being the #1 problem. Jobs, and now inflation is getting to be a problem. Of course, a lot of people look for inflation, the rising prices, but inflation really is the increase in supply of money by the Federal Reserve. We've heard of that group of people. But right now, the consequence of inflating the currency or debasing the currency is that prices will rise, and that's what we're seeing now. You know, they're trying to figure out, and there's a lot of talk in the campaign about gasoline prices going up. Oh, there's $4, could go $5, could go $6. Why is the price of gasoline going up? Well, the #1 reason the price of gasoline going up is the value of your dollar is going down. Now, dollar price is up. So this is something that the people are complaining about, and I don't believe you're hearing the real answers from the other candidates, and that is that we don't have a free market. What they would like to do is say that the problems we have today are at the fault of all those people in the last 15 or 20 years, all that free enterprise, too much free enterprise. That is not true. We've had too much government is what we have. increasing the wars. That's not going to help. So we have to change the direction, and it's not complicated what we have to do. I'm convinced that we got into this mess because we've had way too many individuals in Washington who either couldn't read, or if they read it, they couldn't understand it. If they couldn't understand it, they didn't follow it, they didn't take their oath of office seriously. You send only people who have respect for the rule of law, who obey the Constitution. Before they wrote the Constitution, they had already had runaway inflation. The continental dollar was destroyed, and it was during the Revolutionary period of time. So they didn't like it. They were darn, and they were determined to make sure that we wouldn't fall in that same trap. So they did a few things in the Constitution. First, they said we, the states, everybody could use nothing other than silver and gold as legal tender, and that still is the law of the land.
That's right.
It said that nobody could even build the credit, which is paper money. And they also did not give any authority for the Federal Reserve System.
That's right.
So if we follow the Constitution, guess what? We wouldn't have a The Fed will end. Hopefully it ends sooner than later, but it will end because their policies are deeply flawed. They can't continue to create all this new money endlessly. The world will not continue, to trust the dollar. And we're getting closer to that point. But what we need to do, though, is to make sure that people know and understand what we're trying to do. Because if they think cutting spending is going to hurt them, then they're going to be very annoyed. But if the Fed is there to buy up all this debt, then we have a major problem. They expect this. They consider it an entitlement. And it isn't. An entitlement is not a right. You have a right to your life. You have a right to your liberty. You ought to have the right to keep the fruits of your labor, but your neighbor is not entitled to the fruits of your labor.
Amen.
Since the Federal Reserve was brought into existence 99 years ago, they've destroyed 98% of the dollar. The 1913 dollar is only worth about 2 cents right now. And I think is a good suggestion, and see if you agree, that next year will be 100 years. I think it would be an appropriate time to repeal the Federal Reserve Act. Inflation is a sinister act. It's a form of taxation. It's a form of transferring power from the middle class and wealth from the middle class to the very wealthy. It happens naturally as you debase the currency. What happens is the people who get to use the new money first, they get the benefit. When the money circulates and multiplies through fractional reserve banking, you end up getting the money worth less value. So your wages go down, and your costs go up. And what happens is it's never fair. It's never fair. Some people suffer more than others. Do you think the people on Wall Street making the millions, if not billions of dollars right now, care whether gasoline is $4 or $5 or $6? No. But what happens is when you destroy a currency, you literally destroy the middle class.
Amen.
You destroy all savings, and that's what we're on the verge of doing right now. This is why the people are upset. And we can't even trust our government to tell us the truth about what's going on. Bernanke, I had a little conversation with him. This statement that, don't sweat it, we only destroy the value of your dollar, 2% per year. But 2% is way too much, but it's a lot more than 2%. It's about 9 or 10%, and society can't last. It can last for a while, but eventually the currency is destroyed, the middle class is destroyed, and even those who have gained all this wealth become the target, and rightfully so. They made money during the bubble days, and guess what? They demanded the bailouts, and they got the bailouts. They got the bailouts from the Fed, and they got the bailouts from the Congress, and it doesn't make a lot of people happy. When information about the Fed, with the bill that we passed last year, as well as some lawsuits. And what we found out, it even was a bit of a surprise to me how big a deal it is. They were involved in $15 trillion of churning credits. And that's a lot more than Congress deals with. That's how powerful the Fed is. Half of it went to foreign banks and foreign central banks and foreign governments. And they resent the fact that we ask questions. Tell you what, the American people should put a lot of pressure on their members of Congress, and I guarantee, if President, I will be putting a lot of pressure. Until the Federal Reserve is removed, we should have a full audit of the Federal Reserve. And 80-some% of the American people agree with it. Liberals, conservatives, independents, Republicans, Democrats, they say oversight is necessary. We might not agree with this or that, but the people are behind this. And it is so important that we find out. I'm convinced that we found out the full story about what the Fed has done in the past and what they're doing now and what they're planning to do in Europe to bail the Europeans out right now. The American people would be quite angry, and they would demand that we have people follow the Constitution, have honest money, have money that they can.
Yes.
The reason why the monetary issue is so important is that we wouldn't have this deficit crisis without the Fed. The best thing that could happen in a small government republic is to pay your bills as you go along. That's what Jefferson argued. He lost the argument, and it was permissible for the federal government to borrow money. Now, if you had direct taxation for everything we did, the government would not get very big because the people would say, hey, we can't afford this. But if they can borrow the money, they sort of hide it, and then the next thing they do is they print money, and you lose value. That is a tax, and some people suffer more than others. So that is, it facilitates big government. If the Fed couldn't buy the debt, guess what would happen? Interest rates would go up, and interest rates would go up, and the government would say, hey, we're borrowing too much money, and the Congress would be forced to cut back. But today, the more they spend, the lower the interest rates go. They just print the money. And it's a fallacy. It's a figment of their imagination that they think this is the answer. And the worst part of it all is it enhances big government. We get a government that believes they can afford it and have the entitlement system, the welfare state, and then they also embark on this military adventurism around the world. And I made a suggestion once, offered legislation to effect to make this point. I said, let's repeal withholding taxes.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Now, that doesn't solve all the problem of taxation, but it would eventually. Because first off, why is the businessman required to keep all these records, turn them over to the federal government, and then be on the defensive if there's any discrepancy? So we become a slave to the government as a record keeper and a participant in the tax system. But what if today we had to pay as we go, and everybody had to write a check every month to pay all the bills? This would end rather quickly. There would be a tax rebellion rapidly, and the whole thing would stop. As long as the borrowing can go on and the inflation goes on and lasts, but what's happened now in the last 4 years, why things are so different now, is that people know it's not true, that you have perpetual prosperity by spending and borrowing, and that debt is good. Debt is bad, earning money is bad, and borrowing is bad. And most people know that after the crisis of 4 or 5 years ago, that things weren't back in order. Matter of fact, I'm convinced that our real problem started actually 10 years ago, at the time when the NASDAQ bubble burst. We had really no economic growth in the past 10 years. Productive jobs have not come back. We've had 34 million new people coming in statistics look, because they're not getting unemployment benefits and they don't have jobs or a disability, it costs a lot of money, but it distorts the unemployment benefits, unemployment numbers. They claim that the unemployment, was 9%, it's dropped down to 8.5%. The truth is, if you look at even government statistics or free market statistics, unemployment is about 22%. That's why people feel good about the economy, and the inflation rate, of course, is much higher than they say. This hurts one group more than the other. People on fixed incomes, people on Social Security, or at limited amount, people who want to take care of themselves. They say they work hard, they don't trust the stock market, and they put their money and they want to save it like you're supposed to do to take care of yourself. But guess what? You get less than 1% on CD, and the Federal Reserve just laughs at it. I've asked both Greenspan and Bernanke about this and says, look, you want lower interest rates for the benefit of the bank, and you think it's going to stimulate the economy. What about an elderly couple who's saving money they're trying to live off their income and their interest? And they just blow it off. They said, well, we have to do what's best for, the economy and get the economy going, and some people might suffer. But it is totally destructive, and everything is turned on its head and doing the wrong things. For instance, the government is supposed to, one of the purposes of government is to protect your liberty, protect your privacy, guarantee the Fourth Amendment. What does the government do? The government protects privacy and secrecy of the government, and they destroy your privacy. So we need to reverse that. We need to make sure they understand that our private lives are our private lives, our economic lives, our medical lives are private and not belonging to the government. What the government is doing, whether it's the Federal Reserve or anything else, they're planning the wars, how many countries are they in, how many dictators are they getting ready to overthrow, how many people have they assassinated. We need to know what the government is doing, because of course it gets out of control and we suffer the consequences. We suffer the consequences of inflation and of our taxation, the loss of our liberties, and they never stop. They continue to do it. But the American people are waking up, and that's the good news.
Yeah.
The numbers are growing by leaps and bounds, let me tell you. The other sick and tired of it. But as of now, routinely, so often the elections come, you change one party to another, and the policies never change. People say, well, they got to be point blank. They say, well, it doesn't sound like you're much of a compromiser. No, I don't compromise. I do work with coalitions. We can find those who agree with us on the war issue or the monetary issue, and they're not all conservatives or all liberals. You bring people together. The Constitution literally brings people together. One of the things that have gone on now for many, many years has been too much compromise. One side likes to spend money for the entitlement system. Say, let us spend the money here. We're going to let you spend your money for the overseas entitlement system and these wars that are going on. And they get together and they compromise and they raise everything. And they make the problems worse. So I think working with coalitions is quite a bit different. And it should bring us all together. Why should all of us want to defend personal liberty?
That's right.
Personal privacy. This should be our goal. I'm convinced the Constitution and freedom brings people together. We come together because we want to understand what freedom is about. Freedom allows us to own our lives, run our lives as we see fit, as long as we don't hurt other people. That you can spend your money like you want to do. Your personal life is your own. Your church values are your own. Or if you don't want church values, you can read the books that you want. All these things to bring it all together, and everybody has a different opinion. Judgmental. They'll say, well, yes, personal liberty, that sounds good. But should be allowed to do it, but assume the responsibility for themselves on how they use it. They won't take care of themselves. And therefore, we have to have this transfer society, make sure that we fall through the cracks and all that. And then what they do with this attempt to make sure nobody falls through the crack, they create these big gaps where more people fall through the cracks, and people lose their jobs, and the whole thing falls down and doesn't work. So we see the problems today. We're sensing it, whether it's the economic problems, the attack on personal liberties, but certainly on foreign policy. This has changed just in the last 4 years. The difference now compared to 4 years ago, the American people are tired of these wars. They want us to. Statistics on where the money comes from into our campaigns. And there are other campaigns where the first 6 big donors are big banks from New York, including Goldman Sachs. But I think my top 4 donors will be the U.S. Army. We need a lot of people in the military. We need a lot of veterans, and they've been there. They should know a lot more about what's happening. And guess what? There aren't too many veterans running for president right now. I think there's one person doing that. National defense is a federal issue. It was meant to be a federal issue, but it was meant to defend our country. It wasn't meant to police the world in a nation building and be does it not work? It undermines our national defense. It undermines our national defense and costs a lot of money. These wars in the last 10 years have added $4 trillion to our debt. Just think, if we had not gone to war except under the conditions of the Constitution with the Declaration, we wouldn't have fought any of those wars. We'd have been $4 trillion richer. Don't you think that would have helped?
Yeah.
The Constitution is very clear on where the power comes to go to war. It's not the president. If I'm your president, I will not go to war without a declaration of war. But there is a need to. If our country is attacked and the people through their congressional members declare war, then we should go to war, fight it, win it, and get it over with, and come on home. A lot has changed, especially since 9/11. It was used
9/11 was an inside job.
And since 9/11, a lot has changed because it was used as an excuse to do a lot of things that they couldn't get done otherwise. They were itching for a long time for a war in Iraq. And Iraq had nothing to do, with 9/11. Al-Qaeda was not in Iraq. There were no quite a few years, they were wanting to go there, and this was the opportunity. They saw that, and they used that as an excuse, and then they forgot about Bin Laden. It took 10 years to find him. And then we occupied and fought these wars, occupied 2 countries, made more enemies, and now we have spread ourselves. We have 900 bases. We're in 130 countries. We have assumed the right to use drones and drop bombs on anybody, any place they want. And then they think we expect them to love us and be pleased and not hate us. I mean, where's the common sense? And one time in the debates, the national debate, I suggested to try to get people's attention. I said, why don't you think about using the golden rule when we deal with foreign policy? What would be so wrong with taking a breath and saying, oh, we want to do this, A, B, C. What if somebody did that to us? How would we react? We would just ask that question. if China put their navy in the Gulf of Mexico, say they're protecting their oil? I mean, we wouldn't be too happy. What if somebody dropped a drone missile someplace and they said, well, we had one of our enemies there, he's a bad guy, and we wanted to wipe him out? We wouldn't take that lightly. And one thing is there wouldn't be bipartisanship here. The whole country would want to be practicing their Second Amendment rights. So difficult to come around to a different viewpoint on foreign policy than we have today. But it is bipartisan. Both parties believe in it. But the founders were pretty adamant about it. They did not want the president to be able to go to war on his own. It had to come as a declaration of war. And also, they had strong advice. They said the best thing is to have anybody who wants to be friends, be friends. Anybody who wants to trade with them. And yes, there will be imperfect countries. But we have achieved much more when we trade and talk to people than we do when we're determined to fight with people. Much more. I think about in the 1960s, I was drafted in 1962 during the missile crisis in Cuba. And it was a tough time. There were missiles in Cuba, and the Soviets had 30,000 of them. They had intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I was rather happy that Kennedy was willing to talk to Khrushchev. Now we're not even allowed to talk to anybody, even if they don't even have a weapon. That you're a wimp if you say, well, let's talk to somebody, let's talk to the Iranians and maybe we work this out. No, but we can talk to the Soviets. They were our allies in World War II. They killed millions and millions of their own people, and yet we were able to at least talk to them, and they didn't have a nuclear exchange in 1962. And I think that is the better way to go. How about in Vietnam? For 10 years, the French were there, we were there for 10 years, a million Vietnamese died, and 60,000 Americans died, and we were told, well, we have to be there, we have to fight, we have to win, because there will be a domino effect, and the communists are going to take over all of Asia. Well, we lost the war, we came home, and it looks like we ended up with China being our banker. That is the problem. I guess it's back now. But when you think about it, now the conditions are much better. But think of how little was achieved, how much it cost, both in life and limb and money, and what was achieved in peace. We end up now, we travel back and forth to Vietnam, we trade with them, they have become westernized. That is the way it should be. I'll win this argument. Not because I will give a persuasive speech in Washington and they're going to agree. More and more Americans agree all the time now. But the reason why we will win the argument is we won't be able to afford it. Just as the Soviets couldn't afford it either in Afghanistan. They had to go home and their empire fell apart. So we won't be able to afford it. There's going to be a difference. And when I talk about cutting spending, cutting this $1 trillion the first year, in that program, I cut a lot overseas, and this means that we can bring our troops home, have them spend their money back here at home. But we need to obviously change our foreign policy. That we cannot be the policeman of the world, and we need to, start a different approach. If we don't do this, what we'll have is a bankruptcy. Worse, we're technically insolvent. The true bankruptcy will come when the money doesn't work. The whole thing comes down on the head. You send out the Social Security checks and they don't buy anything. And we're moving into that. They've created trillions and trillions of new dollars, and they're just starting to sit out into the economy, and that's why gasoline prices are going up, education costs are going up, medical care costs are going up. Then they have to have wage and price controls and trying to contain it. But if you wait that long, it's going to be very, very difficult. If we want to work our way out of it, we have to cut spending. That is what the politicians won't do. But I think if the American people understand it, that we can get the support, because if we don't do it in a deliberate fashion and take it be able to agree and end up not even be able to take care of the elderly who have been taught to be totally dependent on the federal government for Social Security, medical benefits, or child health care. We can have those as priorities. You know, I don't think those are really the greatest programs in the world. They're great right now, but there's so many people dependent. And if we don't want to start there and say, okay, what we need to do is cut out food stamps and everything's going to be okay, or cut down Medicare, and that is essentially what they're doing on Social Security. They're decreasing the cost, you know, the money going out because the purchasing power goes down, and the elderly are already suffering. So you will have a lot more of that unless we accept the idea that we should change our foreign policy. I have it that we say $500 billion, you know, with the change in foreign policy. And I'm convinced we'd have a stronger national defense, not a weaker. We would be less vulnerable. Under conditions today where government grew too big and destroyed the economy, we don't have free markets, we don't have sound money, we don't have balanced budget, and we wonder why we don't have the jobs, and a tax code is ridiculous, a regulatory code is out of control. But there's another thing that happens when government gets too big. When government grows, the people's liberties shrink. There is no doubt about it. And our government is way too big. And if you feel a burden of big government on your backs because you feel like you have less freedom of choice, it is a natural consequence of allowing the government to be too big. So the answer is we have to shrink the size and scope of our government. After 9/11, there was a bill that they wanted to pass. You know, they had tried for years. It was on the books, but within weeks it was passed. And it was something called misnamed. Obviously, they called it the Patriot Act. And obviously, you agree it was a very unpatriotic act. Now, when that bill was being voted on, I recall sitting beside another member of Congress. He voted for it. And guess what? You know, I voted against it. I asked him, I said, why are you voting for this? And the particular bill that was on the floor came up rather rapidly. Nobody had really seen it. And we had an hour debate, up and down vote. It was within a couple of weeks. And I said, why are you voting for this? He says, well, we just had 9/11. He says, and it's called the Patriot Act. I said, well, you know, there's some bad stuff in this bill. He said, yeah, I know that. I said, you know, you didn't have a chance to read it. Yeah, I know that. He said, but I can't go home and tell my people back home that I voted against the Patriot Act because they wouldn't understand what the problems are. I said, but that's your job. Go back home and explain it. That particular bill wouldn't have been passed, you know, if it would have been called repeal the Fourth Amendment Act. So when we get around to repealing the Patriot Act, hopefully soon, we won't call the bill repeal the Patriot Act. We're going to call it restore the Fourth Amendment. You know, the Patriot Act gives all this clout to the TSA, to poke and prod and search and do all those things at the airport. So it's the idea that they don't even need, they can write their own search warrant. The person during the searches can write their letter to search us. It isn't approved by the courts. So we've literally thrown our Fourth Amendment out. And the founders were so emphatic about that. That was one of the incentives, you know, for the revolution. They were sick and tired of the military coming and invading their houses and doing all those things. So they wanted our privacy. They wanted us protected. And yet this has literally been thrown out. So now you compound that with some of the changes that have been going on for the last 30, 40 years of how they have used the drug laws. I mean, they use the drug laws as an excuse also to come busting into houses to make sure people aren't doing things they should be doing. would just be under more control, if they would just follow the law, is what we need to do. I mean, it is just horrible. It's a lawless society that we have today. It isn't the people. The lawless is too often with our own government.
That's right.
The president has added, problems to this because a year ago he announced that he had the authority to assassinate American citizens. At the previous point, he's done it on 3 occasions. He found one guy that was very, very controversial, Alaki, and they didn't have any charges made. They didn't try him or anything like that, but they knew he had associated with some people that might be bad people. But anyway, they decided he was bad enough. He had to be assassinated, so they achieved that. Then a week or so later, they decided, well, that he had a family member that was associated with him too. He was also guilty, so they went and assassinated him. But they were a little bit embarrassed because he was 16 years old. He was outside barbecuing with his cousin, and they considered this legitimate. When the president was asked about, where do you get this authority? He's not the commander-in-chief. And he says, that's a little bit different. He says, but the Constitution says that a president can do anything he wants except those things that he is prohibited from doing. That he has turned the Constitution upside down. He is only allowed to do the things that are explicitly given. The Congress has compounded this because, in December they delivered a bill to the president called the National Defense Authorization Act. And this gives the president even more power. And he signed it. He said, Happy New Year to the American people. He signed it. And it literally says now that the president has the authority to use the military to arrest an American citizen. Deny the American citizen a trial, deny him even an attorney, and he can be put in prison indefinitely in a secret prison. That is the law of our land. Now, 2 things. If we allow that to stand, if we allow it to stand where we don't get very annoyed about what's happening in our airports with the poking and prodding and seeing these pictures. This weekend, they said that a woman could get on the airplane because she had a breast pump and was breastfeeding her baby.
Right.
And they made her demonstrate this in order for her to allow to get on the airplane. We should be outraged by this. We cannot live in a free society if this trend continues in this direction.
That's right.
So what I see, though, is something good about all this. The American people have finally gotten fed up.
Amen.
The Soviet system collapsed. They didn't have much to go back to. At least we had a pretty darn good country. We had a pretty darn good constitution. We had a pretty darn good understanding of free markets and private property rights and contracts. And so it isn't like we had to invent something new. It wasn't perfect before, but there's nothing wrong with us going back to picking up the pieces and even improve on what we have. We can even have a better gold standard than we had. We can have a better understanding of the marketplace and an understanding of how markets work. And we live in an age right now where there is an opportunity for conditions are different from 4 years ago. The people are upset about the Federal Reserve for the first time in this 100-year history of the Fed. The first time the Fed is not on the table.
That's right.
They are annoyed by the economy, and they know the government brought this all along with the Fed. They're sick and tired of the wars. They think government is too big. So the answer is to be found by finding people who will really defend these principles of liberty and sending only people, whether it's to the Congress or to the White House, that believe in these issues. But if we follow this, like I said, we can bring people together. The issue of the Constitution was designed for all of us, imperfect at a time, but there's no reason why we don't have a better understanding of liberty. We should bring people together once again because we want to all enjoy our freedom, maybe for different reasons, but we become more tolerant. We invite people to come and to enjoy their liberty as they see fit. Now, you know, it has been said by the founders many times that, you know, it doesn't take a total majority to do this. We don't have to wait till we get 51%. What you have to have is a tireless minority who's willing to start brush fires of liberty in the minds of men. Samuel Adams and others were emphatic about this, that ideas do have consequences, and they absolutely do. Bad ideas have bad consequences. Small number of people who are dedicated do change the country. Yes. And we do. We have a small number of people, but this number of people now have grown by leaps and bounds, and they're energetic, and they're getting involved, and I believe that we are actually in the middle and of a major change in attitude, just as it was at the time of the Depression, where they said free markets caused the Depression, but by that time they had already undermined the system. Today, the system is going in a different direction. The people are waking up, especially the young people. I mean, the places where I go on campus. So the issue is not complicated. It's really personal liberty. Yeah. And if you understand this, this means that you understand the marketplace and sound money, and it should excite all of us. And this is what we have to do. We have to continue this. We have to do something in this election. If a strong message can be sent from Alaska, which is known for your independence, yeah. The campaign obviously is very, very important. The ideas are very, very important. The enthusiasm is necessary, and we have all the ingredients. The necessary, the need for something, the understanding of what we need to put in its place, and now we have an energized group of people who are willing to work for it. So everybody has a responsibility. Your responsibilities are different for different people. We don't know exactly what your particular job is to become well informed, but to participate. In the short run, we do know that we have a tremendous opportunity and on Tuesday to make a difference. I hope you will join and make sure that you will be there on Tuesday. A lot of times I'm accused about going back to the dark ages. You probably have been accused of the same thing. They say, what you want to do is go back to the 19th century. But you know, freedom is a really very new idea. It hasn't been tried and tested like tyranny. Those who argue with us about the foreign policy and call us the isolationists, and they're the ones who want to put the tariffs and the sanctions on countries. But they're the ones who are always, causing trouble. But tyranny is ancient. It's been here around for the entire experience of history. It's only freedom that is relatively new. It's been barely tested. And we had a fantastic result. We became the wealthiest country, the biggest middle class ever, and the maximum amount of freedom. Yep. And now it isn't there. Our middle class is shrinking and it's getting poorer. So there's a real challenge there. And if we don't want it to break down, which it will if we continue to do this, we just can't continue to do what we're doing. And right now, I don't see many offering an alternative to this. At least, as other candidates of the other party, it seems like they're endorsing the same thing over and over again. So we have to present our case because it is so necessary that our case comes through. I believe that if we do our job right, that we can restore the greatness of this American. Yeah.